So this morning's session's modern application development, and I think we got parts that'll be good for the people we've got in here. And we've actually got three things that we're going to do. We're going to talk about team services, and we're actually going to have a little bit of lab here where we're going to write a little bit of code and seeing how team services brings it all together for us. We're going to take a break, and then we're going to talk about web app cloud architectures into Azure. I think I renamed the section, and it's part of what was on the agenda, but we're really going to talk about architecture and components that are available to us, which both developers and architects are going to want to know about, because this is how we're going to put stuff together. And the most important thing that we're going to do today is right in the middle is we're going to take a break. That's my favorite times of the day is when we take a break. So that said, you guys ready? Okay. One other thing, this is at your pace. I'm here for you guys. So we got a lot to cover. We can go as deep or as wide as we want to. I'll let you guys, if you guys want to dive deeper, say, hey, stop, talk to me more about that. I can go as deep as you want. If you guys are going, hey, no, that's really boring, I don't want to hear any more about it, let me know. We'll move on. Sound good? Yes. All right. Has everybody had their coffee yet? Or caffeine or anything they need to get going? Cool. So with that said, we're going to start our first topic, which is Visual Studio Team Services. And as I like to sometimes refer to it as, where did you move my cheese? And nobody gets that yet. Has anybody worked with Visual Studio Team Services? No. All right, has anybody played with the Azure portal? Okay. Are things where they were last week? No, that UI is constantly changing. And Visual Studio Team Services has actually gone through a lot of that. In fact, when I first put the agenda together, I was going to talk about the 5 main sections that make it up. It's now 4. So I'm going, thanks guys, you guys are killing my presentation right off the get-go.
We love when they move our cheese. They do it every 5 years.
About every 5 years? Yeah, apparently Visual Studio Team Services has been moving the cheese about every 3 months. So, but it's been good ways that they've done it. It's kind of cool. So what is Visual Studio Team Services? So nobody in here has actually worked with it yet. So it's a suite to achieve DevOps, to kind of enable collaboration and whatnot, but it's got some major components to it. You've got a dashboard, which is a fancy way of putting together some information that I never actually see because I'm actually working in it, not looking at the things that are flying. But you've got a dashboard that can help you communicate what build statuses are, how many work items are in the queue, who's working on it today, how much stuff has moved, and you can customize the heck out of it, which is kind of cool. Managers and team leads tend to like this. People who are getting stuff done look at it when they log in and never look at it again. Cool feature. We've also got some code management features. We've got some work management features, build and release management features, and test management features. We're going to talk about all of these, but I'm going to move through some of this. We'll go deep unless you guys want to talk further, but I want to go through these to give you some familiarity with what we're going to do in the lab, which is coming up after this. So the first one, and the one that I always care about here, is code management. It does host your code, and you've got 2 options. You've got Team Foundation version control, and you've got Git. And I know this picture might be a little bit dated, but if you guys remember the Matrix, you get to pick 2, and it's hard to switch. Honestly, the truth is, for me, and I hope it is for you, now I'll try to convince you guys, Git's the way to go. Hands down, don't even look at TFS. Honestly, if I was working for a company or a team that says we're using TFS, I'd go look for another company or another team. It's that bad in comparison. My personal choice. But don't let my personal choice guide you guys in that decision. Git's been around forever. It's been around since the 1980s, late 80s, right around there was actually when it was initially developed. It's a distributed version control system, which is a little bit different than TFS. TFS is a centralized version control system. And some major differences between that, but it gives you a lot more flexibility. You can have a lot more flexible development workflows, code management workflows. I'll plug you in back here. But it significantly outclasses, what are the competitors out there? You've got CVS, SVN, Perforce, ClearCase. My opinion, again, I think it outclasses Team Foundation version control. And reality is, I think most people are using it nowadays. There are some corporations that are still using TFS, but almost every single open source project out there is on Git. Some will be on Mercurial, which is a competitor to Git, but it's a small subset. And you've got some huge companies and projects that are on Git. You've got the Linux kernel, Google, Facebook, Twitter, Microsoft. Most of Microsoft is actually now using Git. So we're going to talk about it in a little bit more. Who in here is familiar with Git? Who uses TFS? Who uses something else?
Mostly SVN.
Mostly SVN? Okay. So I actually was prepared to go deeper into it because this is actually one of the very first classes where the majority of the audience has been using Git, so we won't go too far into it unless you guys want to. No? All right, we'll avoid it. All right. But again, for me, the biggest benefit is your flexible workflows. You've got centralized workflows. You can actually do centralized workflows. You've got one master repository. People clone the repository. They make their commits. They push it to the repository. The only big difference between SVN and that is that you're committing to master instead of trunk. You're done. It's very much the same. Feature branches. And the centralized workflow, good for one person, small team, small project, very controlled, works well. Feature branches starts trying to use short-lived branches to put all the commits and organize them into one particular branch before bringing them in and merging them into that master branch. A lot better for keeping a cleaner commit history in your source code when you've got larger teams, small to medium-sized teams. Gives you a lot more control. You can now take advantage of pull requests to do code reviews and ensure code quality. You can put, and talking in terms of Visual Studio Team Services, you can put some branch policies around that, so you can force people to use pull requests. You can get certain level of approvers before things get committed. You can force it to build a branch and pass a build before it actually comes into the development branch. Lots of cool things you can do there. That's the tooling on it. You can accomplish it with Git proper, but you gotta do some work. You gotta communicate, right? Git flow. Anybody familiar with Git flow? Okay, we got one person. Git flow is actually just feature branching, but with some rigor around it. How we're going to name our branches. We're also going to have some historical branches for releases, hotfixes, maintenance. Very powerful. Requires your team to have a lot more knowledge of it, and it's also a double-edged sword. One of the problems with feature branches and with Git flow is long-lived branches. If you've worked in the world of SVN, yes, those still hurt in Git. If you're not very rigorous about it and regimented, you're going to have some long-lived branches. It's going to create some merge hell. That's that. Yep.
One of the things I've heard is very powerful with Mercurial. I don't know enough about Git to know if it's there. And Git is you can do commits while you're disconnected from your repository.
You can do it.
You can do that.
Yeah, that's the nature of a distributed version control system, right? The idea is I've got a centralized one. When I say I clone it, I'm actually creating my own local repository. So I can turn the internet off, hit the power switch on the internet, turn it down for everybody. Do all my commits locally, power the internet back up, and then push my changes back out to that area. The forking workflow, who's familiar with forking? Has anybody ever heard the term? All right, cool, everybody, or half the people at least have. This is actually very, very powerful. It's fundamentally different in the sense that there are multiple server-side repositories. So, and this works great when you're working cross organizations. Actually, a lot of open source projects work this way. I've got an open source project, or my company has a project, and I'm working with another vendor or another organization or partner, and we're collaborating on this. But I want to keep tight control on what's going on into my project, my brand, and whatnot. So what I'll tell them to do is to create a fork of my repository. So they will actually clone the repository, put it up on their own Git server. Forking is actually very easy with GitHub. You hit a button and do that. Visual Studio Team Services, not quite there yet with forking. I heard it's coming, but we'll see where it's at. But they create their own, and basically their teams work on their own repositories, and when an external team says, hey, we're ready to incorporate the changes, they send what's called a pull request. Visual Studio supports pull request, GitHub supports pull request, Bitbucket supports pull request by push of a button, creates a ticket, notifies people, and automates the whole process. And you don't need the tooling. I can send an email to say, hey, pull my stuff, here's my Git repository, and somebody from the central team brings it down, copies that branch over, or that change set, builds it, makes sure it's up to par, and then commits it to the main repository. The drawback on this is it's a little bit slower to get things into that main development line, but on the flip side, you get a lot more control. You get to say when stuff actually goes in, and you can collaborate across organizations. So really cool. We're actually going to use that method for the lab, and it's going to be kind of fun. Any questions on the different workflows here? Anybody not sold on Git? I've done my job. See you guys tomorrow. I'm out of here. So code management, again, this is kind of just a screenshot of what it looks like, but it's, if you guys are familiar with GitHub or Bitbucket or any of the other hosting tools that are available out there, it gives you quick access to your main development branch. You can switch between branches, you can look at the files, you can view the source code right here in this environment to go look at it. Provides you a history, and we can actually flip over and take a look at it here. I've actually got it up on my screen. And of course it doesn't show up for you guys. So let me.
Is this part of GitHub?
This is not GitHub, this is Visual Studio Team Services.
Okay.
Where's the stop presentation button? And slideshow. All right. So here we go.
Part of team services compares with something like Stash.
Kinda. Stash is a small subset of the Atlassian suite. It would compare more with Bitbucket. Is what it would compare with. It would compare with GitHub. So we're actually going to look at a project we made here. And is it now all in Bitbucket? Sure. I haven't worked with the Atlassian suite in a couple days. Another question. Yeah, it's going to be right up there. I'm sorry about that. It's a quick tour through the areas here. You've got your files, and again, you can go into our source code and peruse through it. We're actually going to be working on this particular file, but it'll load it for you. You can actually edit it directly in here and commit it back into there, so you don't even need to pull it down and look at it. It's kind of cool. Historically, you can look at, here's the stuff that's been happening. You can actually see when a build was successful around a particular commit. What else do we got? It's on here. Lots of sorting, lots of filters. Branches, kind of cool. I've actually got 2 branches on here. I started using the Git flow pattern on here where you've got a master branch and a develop branch, but you can kind of see what's going on, what the last actions between the two. You can actually see there's a pull request open from here to merge 3 commits over to the master branch. You've got your pull request environment, and again, this is kind of one of those where you can go in here and you can say, hey, here's all the stuff that's being asked to be merged into master. You can review the file, so this is how we can do code reviews. And you can say, oh, here was a change to the README file. Wow, that looks exciting. Good code. There were some changes down here on the index.html file, and we can peruse them and look at them. And very quickly, I can approve it, or I can complete it, merge it in, build it, all that good fun stuff, quick and easy. If you're in a team lead position and you have to do a lot of code reviews for your team, you're going to be spending a lot of time in this, and they've done a pretty good job with it so far. Questions around the code management area? Yeah?
So this is using Git as the backend, not TFS?
Correct. Git is the backend.
So we have a front end for Git.
Yes, you have a front end for Git. It actually can use TFS as the backend, and you get a similar front end for it. Not quite the same features, not as rich. You guys are too easy, no questions?
I'm just curious how
Yeah.
The TFS team, which is the TFS is a Microsoft product, right?
Yeah.
How do they feel about Microsoft choosing Git as an organization?
Oh man, you know what?
Long story, you don't have to go into it.
I don't know. I really don't, because I haven't talked to any of the TFS development team. I could say that if that was my project that I was working on, I'd probably be kind of sour about it, because my project is kind of, I don't know. I don't know if they've got big plans for it. I've heard that new versions of TFS for on-premise is even shipping with the Git engine in it, so it's even going on-prem. Part of me would be excited that we're not trying to do things differently because we can, but rather doing what the community and the industry is doing, which I think is good. I think if I was on the original team that decided, hey, we're going to go build TFS, I would have scratched my head and said, why? There's already something out there. It's hard to say. It's really hard to say what they're thinking. As a consumer of source control, I'm super happy about it. It's definitely, I've been in the .NET space for a while. I've actually avoided working on a team or with companies that had TFS for at least 95% of my career, and it's been great. because that 5% really sucked, like bad. Like I still got to go see a therapist about it. All right, so let's continue on. And of course, I don't know if it's going to start me back at the beginning here. Sure it is, but we're just going to cruise on through code management. So work management. This is going to be, if you're in the Atlassian suite, this is going to be your equivalent of your Jira. If you're in GitHub, this is going to be the equivalent of your issues. If in TFS, it's your work items and things that are in there as well too. It gives you a few different templates for your processes. You've got an Agile template, a Scrum template, a Kanban template. Thankfully, they didn't include a waterfall template. I would have shot myself. But it's very flexible. You know, you've got templates for items that are in there, so you can define your epics, you can define your user stories, you can define your features, you can define bugs, issues. You can add fields to them, make them more. I mean, it's totally configurable to what you can do. So again, if you work with Jira, same thing, right? GitHub issues, not as flexible. They're very bare bones, but they're efficient for communication, so I like them. In all of my years, well, not a lot of years, I've been working with Visual Studio Team Services. I've actually never modified the templates. They've been sufficient, which I like that too. I like to just kind of click and go. And that's pretty much work management. It's not a lot to it, but this is where you're doing your work. Ties in really cool with the source control or the code management bits. So for example, if I've got a new user story and we're using the Git flow pattern or the feature branch pattern for our workflow, I can from there just say, hey, create my feature branch. Just click a button, creates my feature branch, applies our naming conventions and schemes to it, so then I can go ahead and pull it down, work on it locally, make my changes and push it back up, and it all gets tracked in there. With the pull requests, I can actually, in my pull request, say, hey, this is for this particular work item or set of work items, and as the pull request is completed and the build succeeds, it actually closes the work items automatically, cleans up our feature branches so we don't keep them around accidentally and have long-lived branches when we don't need them. So lots of really neat features to just automate a lot of that. Man, if you're in the full Atlassian suite, you're going to get that integration between Jira and Bitbucket. If you're in the GitHub world, you're going to get a lot of that as well in between the GitHub options that are on there.